Hey, Giuseppe, can you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hello, Brandon.
Yeah, how's the video quality and how's the the audio
Both
quality?
video and audio, they're great. You're defined and
All
you're
right,
clear. So 10 out of 10.
perfect. All right, so I am, as usual, I'm going to be sharing my screen on another computer. So can
Yeah.
you, let's see, I'm gonna give that a shot here in just a moment. And for anyone else that's there in the background, welcome. We're just gonna do some setup for 5 or 10 minutes or so.
Oh, we are well on time. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, station views here.
All right, so you can see, and now it looks to me like you can see my browser window, but you can't see my browser and desktop like we had planned, right?
No, no, it's a window for now. I mean,
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Because when we had run this test, you were
uh-huh.
able to I was able to resize the browser and then you were able to see the desktop background, right?
Um, did you share the window or the entire screen? That may be the difference.
Let me go back and take a look.
Because if you share the window, then
Let me go under advanced. Advanced portion of screen is selected. So let me shut
yeah,
that
should
off.
be the entire.
I don't see that as an option. Under advanced, I see portion of screen, computer audio.
Let me see. Okay, now it's quite zoomed. Uh,
Yeah, I can see it. That here, let me go ahead and see if I can resize this. Maybe that's the key there, and then I'll resize my browser tab. Um,
okay,
there we
now
go.
is yeah, now it's doing what we have in mind. Yeah.
Perfect. And I see a bunch of okay.
Yeah, there are some gray spaces there that now are disappearing.
Uh, that's rich. Those gray spaces
Uh-huh.
are where the zoom overlays are. Let me go
Ha,
ahead and just
interesting.
oh, they keep changing their software and they're not making it better. All right, I'm gonna stop screen sharing and I'm gonna see if
Yeah.
I can just try again in the beginning. Because I can't even manage the screen very easily with the way I've set it up because there's lots
No,
of
right now the proportions are
overlay.
quite nice. Um,
Yeah, definitely. Totally
yeah.
agree.
And there are just those overlays that are distracting.
Right on. Okay, so what I'm doing in the background here is I'm trying to close my screen
Mm-hmm.
share,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I think Zoom crashed. Yeah, Zoom
Oh,
crashed. Uh, so I will come back in.
I can still see your webcam microphone on the other computer. So
Yeah. Let's see. You just note that in the future, I think I need a link to enter the Zoom meeting that is not like all the other participants.
Then you would have, I think you have to be the host to do that.
Ah, okay.
It's like having unlimited power over everything.
Mhm. So I'm gonna try to share the entire desktop again.
Yeah, let's try.
Okay, I see. How's that look?
Let me see. Uh, except those gray spaces, everything else looks good.
Yeah, all these gray spaces are the zoom.
Overlays.
When your overlays, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
that's what
they
you're
are
seeing.
visible on YouTube too. So yeah,
I
I
will go
think
ahead. I'll move them to my other monitor here.
yeah,
That's set up.
if you can move them, all right. Otherwise, I think we can go. With the usual. Okay, just a couple of them remaining now.
So, okay, I think we figured it out.
There's yeah. Now it's good. Now it's good.
Beautiful. We'll give it another just a moment to
Yeah.
mention something to the audience here. It's 2 minutes past the hour.
Yeah.
We're gonna jump in at 5 minutes past the hour. So we'll give another few minutes here and we'll describe the format, do the introductions, and start the webinar.
Yeah, there's 41 participants now, so we can wait a bit.
I had to do a last minute reorganization. Usually I'd be at the monitors in the background, but
Uh-huh.
the sun's Costa Rican sun is shining through over here. So it was so
Yeah.
I'm at another desk that I have in front of my standing desk, and it's absolutely totally cluttered with Lego projects and my giant BB-8 toys and a microscope over on this end, and it's just a little claustrophobic at the moment.
Well, the alternative would have been you having like a big sun halo behind your head or something
Exactly.
like that.
Exactly.
So
Totally.
in any case, you're looking good on YouTube too, Branden. So I think we set it up in the right way this time.
All right. Fine tuning.
Yep.
All right, Giuseppe, Faustino, I think we're ready to go.
Yeah,
So
I think we're good to go.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to, I think this is our third What's the Wiggle webinar. And the objective of these webinars is to look at some seismic data and help orient you into how to identify earthquakes versus other signals that you'll see on your Raspberry Shakes. And we've been experimenting with different ways of doing this. Last time that we were together, we looked at major earthquake and then looked at different stations within the seismic network to see how the earthquake signal changed and its characteristics with distance from the source. And so we're going to do something similar to that today. We're going to be working today with Giuseppe, who I was just speaking with on the call, and Faustino, who's also there in the background. Both of them are going to be available to answer your questions in real time in the chat. And they'll also be gathering some of the questions that you ask for the end of the webinar. So the webinar itself, at least the talking portion, is about 30 minutes long. And then we follow that up with 15 minutes or so of questions, open questions. During that time, we can also queue up and look at examples that are adjacent to the content of the webinar. So if you have a particular earthquake or trace that you want to look at your station, we can pull that up on data view and take a look and answer any questions that you have. As with all of the previous webinars, we're recording and streaming live on YouTube. And so this content will be available for review later on as well. And if you missed the live session of the webinar, we welcome you as well. So the tools that we're going to use today are Station View and Data View. And the focus of these webinars is always using the web tools of Raspberry Shake. There's really two reasons for that. One is that we think these are the best tools for visualizing Raspberry Shake data. And the other reason beyond that is we are using our own tools. I'm always discovering through these webinars little enhancements that I want to make to Station View and Data View, and we're logging those so our colleagues in the software department continue to make enhancements. So with that, we'll begin. We're going to begin with an event that happened on the 13th of January in Japan. It was a magnitude 6.8. So almost magnitude 7, showed up really well across the entire Raspberry Shake network. And we're going to start with a station that was really close to the source. We're going to talk a little bit about the characteristics of that earthquake. And then we're going to look at stations that are progressively further away. So the first station that we're going to queue up is one that's called R28BA, and this one is in Japan. So that's this station here. And I'm going to jump into data view just by clicking on the waveform display on the right-hand side here. That's going to open up the last 24 hours of data for this station. And I've never used data view on this browser before, so I'm just going to skip the introduction. And we're going to click on the calendar view over here, and we're going to jump to the 13th of January. And the first thing that you can see is that because this particular station is very close to the source, inside of data view, we label the earthquake for you, so it's easy to find. And in this particular example, the earthquake stands head and shoulders above everything else that's in view. So it's very easy to identify. It's this trace right here. We'll just click on that, and then we'll zoom out a little bit so we can see more of the earthquake. And in this case, you see a very classic primary and secondary, or P and S wave arrival times. And so when we come out of the background noise here, you can see that there's this increase in amplitude. Right here is the beginning of the P wave. And then over here, where there's this little lull in the wiggle, that's where the S wave begins. So that's your secondary wave. Now within seismology, the simplest way to look at earthquakes is to look at for the P and the S. But then there's many, many other phases, we call them, that if you are more advanced, you can look at. We're not going to get into those, but I will mention that every one of these phases has to do either with the source characteristics of the earthquake or the reflections off of different layers within the earth. So one of the things I like to use data view for is actually to get out of the waveform view pretty fast. And the reason I would like to get out of the waveform view pretty fast is that with my naked eye, there's very little information that I can see in the waveform view, which is the time domain. If I change this to the spectrogram view with this button here, then we're going to enter the frequency domain. When we do that, the x-axis of time will remain the same, and then the y-axis will change. And it'll change from the velocity, which it is now, which is in meters per second, into amplitude. And then the colors in the background will represent the intensity of the frequencies at any particular time. Okay, so now you see that. Now I'm going to toggle back and forth because I want to point out a few different things. The first thing I want to point out is look at the amplitude here of the P wave is low compared to the S wave. But then when you switch into the spectrogram view, you'll notice that you actually, within the P wave, you have higher frequency information here. And so on this axis, I misspoke before, we have frequency, the color is representing amplitude, and then time is on the x-axis. So the P wave has, I'll trace it out here. This is about where the energy ends. And that is all, that's maybe up to 20 hertz or so. And then it comes down, and then you can trace the energy over here, and it slowly diminishes over time. You can see the arrival of the S wave pretty clearly in these high intensity colors right here. And then you have lesser intense colors over here, because generally the P wave is focused in higher frequencies. It doesn't have a lot of this low frequency content. That low frequency content is generally in the secondary waves. So we'll switch back and forth just another time or two so you can see that. One other thing I'd like you to notice, and this really drives home the fact that you can look at this waveform and you can say, okay, here's an earthquake, but you can't tell everything that's going on, because notice when you go into the spectrogram view, notice this high frequency noise. See this high amplitude here, here, and here. It's kind of periodic. This is around 40 hertz. It's inconsistent. This is likely mechanical noise. You also have a few bands that run horizontally across the spectrogram. Pretty consistent frequency over time. This one's somewhere in a range of 25 and 20, and another one at 24 or 23 hertz. And they run across the entire heliquarter. Now, these features that are not related to the earthquake are invisible to the naked eye when we're looking at the waveform plot here. And that's because the amplitude of the earthquake is so great. And so that's the reason that the spectrogram view is so useful, is it really allows you to see the fullness of what's available in the earthquake signal at any one time. Now, what we're going to see as we step away from the source of this earthquake is that the high frequency earthquake data is going to be lost. And the reason for that is that the Earth acts as a giant filter. And so as the earthquake is moving through the Earth is filtering the high frequency information away, and you're left with only the low frequencies. This is very similar to what happens with sound in the atmosphere, where if you have a very high frequency noise, like a bird call, you're going to be able to hear that maybe at a distance of kilometers, but you're not going to be able to hear that at tens and hundreds of kilometers away. But a big low frequency signal, like might be emitted by an explosion, you'll be able to hear that at further distances. So with distance, high frequency information falls away. That's why it's really interesting to look at earthquakes very close to the source to get the full perspective of what kind of energy was released and at what frequencies. So we'll navigate away from this station, and we'll take a look at one that is, we'll look for it over here this time. This is 50 EC. I don't remember where this example is. So we'll take a look in station view for this example by using this icon. All right, so we are in Alaska now. So we are pretty far away from the source of the earthquake that was in Japan. I'll just navigate back to data view. And we're looking on the 13th. Great. And on the 13th, the signals that stand out the most to me are this little spike that's here, this trace here, this one down here, and this one down here. And I don't really see with my naked eye the earthquake. So we're going to have to go hunting for it a little bit. Fortunately, I know the time of the earthquake from the last trace. It was at 12:20 UTC time. So I'm going to kind of guesstimate that it's around 12:30. Okay, maybe it's a little earlier. And then I'm going to switch away from the spectrogram view for a moment. Just look at the wiggles. Okay, so that's our earthquake. Now notice this earthquake looks very different. This earthquake has one impulsive onset here that tapers off with time. And if we switch to the spectrogram view, we might be able to see why. Okay, notice that the frequency content of this earthquake at this distance is a lot lower. We're already very low in frequencies. Yet you can still see it in the raw data very well. We have a good signal to noise ratio here. I think what we're looking at here is the arrival of the S wave, but you can't really tell. You don't have a clear P and S wave arrival at this distance. Now, this is now considered a teleseismic earthquake or a global earthquake because the distance that we are at from the source. And as a contrast, what we're seeing here, in addition to that earthquake, is likely 3 regional or local earthquakes. So I'm going to open up one or two of these just so that you can see the difference in how it appears when it's local. Okay, so this is a very local earthquake. This is a great example. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit on this one. We'll come out to the waveform view. And you can see, okay, again, we have the clear P arrival, and then we have a secondary bump here. This is the S wave. Now in seismology, you can actually, before I say that, you can see the P wave really clear here and the S wave clear here as well. Remember that the higher intensity of the color, the higher the amplitude at that particular frequency. And so what we're seeing here is a concentration of energy right here. That's the P wave. Then there's this kind of space where it's energetic, but it's not as high energy. And then boom, the S wave arrives. Now the time difference between the P and the S wave is significant. Both of these waves, they're traveling through the Earth at different velocities. So your P wave, for example, it might be coursing through the Earth at like 5,000 or so meters per second. The S wave might be moving at a casual 2,000 meters per second. And so over time, as you look at stations that are further away from the source of an earthquake, what you'll see is that the P and the S wave will actually separate. And that's because the P is moving faster than the S. And so at further and further away, you have this distance. And if you make assumptions about the average speed of each of these waves through the Earth, right? You assume it's homogeneous. You can actually calculate the distance you are away from the earthquake just using the P and the S time, just using the arrival time and the time difference between the two to give you a general idea of how far away you are. But generally speaking, The closer you are, the closer the P and the S are to one another, the closer you are to the earthquake. Notice too that in contrast to the Japanese teleseismic magnitude 6.8 earthquake that we were looking at, look at the frequency content of this local earthquake. It lights up the entire frequency band from low frequencies all the way up to about 50 hertz, which is the detection limit of the Raspberry Shake. So very, very nice example here. Right, so we will look at, we'll look at one more example. We'll go a little further away. Before we go further away, I'm just going to pull up this earthquake one last time. Was down here. There we go. There's that earthquake. There's your teleseismic event. Now, as we go even further away, what we'd expect to see is that the information available to us is even less, meaning that we're going to have less high frequency content than we even see here. So I'm going to pull up our next example and see where this one is. Okay, this example is in Brazil. All right. And we're going to jump back to the 13th again. Now, if I'm looking for this earthquake, I know that it happened in Japan and it happened at 12:20. So let's go directly to 12:20. You can see in the helicoid plot, it's really, I mean, there's so much noise here, I can't tell where this earthquake is. So we're going to have to click around to find it. I'm going to start at 12:20. I guess it's a little further down here. Okay. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and I'm going to go directly into the spectrogram view because this station has you can see there's a lot of high frequency mechanical signal here that's masking the earthquake. Let me get back there. All right, we're back. Okay. And I'm going to go back to 12:20 here, which is a little further over. Notice there's no earthquake here. Now, because we're in Brazil, this earthquake happened in Japan. My expectation would be that it took a long time for this earthquake to travel all the way from Japan to Brazil. That might be a distance as much as, maybe it's 6,000 kilometers. So I'd expect that this earthquake would appear later in time. And so we're going to scroll forward in time. Maybe it took even 20 minutes to arrive in Brazil. Okay, and I don't have any data loading, oddly. Could just be my internet connection. We'll skip this station. We'll queue up another one. We'll go to 2F81. I think this is close by in Uruguay, also in South America. Okay, we are in Uruguay. So similar thought pattern that this is not going to be available to us at 12:20. It's going to have shown up a little later in time. And we'll go forward maybe half an hour. go back. All right, so this is super hard to see, but that's the earthquake right there. You can see that there's a little bit of higher amplitudes in the low frequencies as compared to what's background noise. We might be able to see this better if we look in the waveforms. Here in the waveforms, you can see, oh, it's really hard to see, but that's the earthquake. And so now an earthquake of this magnitude, this far from the source, we can see it, but it doesn't have a lot of energy. And then this is actually, we're going to spend a moment here and we're going to talk about some seismic noise signals. And then we'll open up for questions. So notice on this plot, we have the earthquake here. It's very low amplitude. It's really hard to tell. You actually can't see it in the waveforms. It would be really hard to know that this was the earthquake unless we had known it happened, knew its source time, and had seen it on some other stations. But what about these other ones? Look at these events that are popping out on the heliquator plot below. Just going to click on one of them and we'll see what it is. Is this an earthquake or not? If you're looking at this data for the first time, it would be really easy to think, oh, that kind of looks like an earthquake. Like maybe there's a P wave and maybe this is the S wave. It's ambiguous, right? It's definitely ambiguous. When you move to the spectrogram view, it becomes less ambiguous, and I'll describe why. The reason is that most of the energy from this event is, how to say this, it's floating or it's suspended in this frequency space that we're looking at here. Meaning it's not rooted by having high energy in the low frequency content, which is what you'd expect for an earthquake. And so you have blobs of high frequency data, okay, that with almost no low frequency content. And so that's an easy way to tell that it's not an earthquake. An even better example of that would be to pull up a station in New York. One of our users, Alan from Massachusetts and New York and the tri-state area, he posted recently about a noise source he had seen on his Raspberry Pi. And he posted it just yesterday. So I'm going to pull up the day from the 20th. And it's right here. Okay. I'll look at this segment here. It's actually at 740, so that's not the one. It's this one here. So if you're looking at your seismic data at home and you see something like this and you think, whoa, is this an earthquake swarm? Like some of these I could easily convince myself by looking at the waveforms that I have some earthquakes here. Maybe that's a P wave and maybe that's an S wave, right? It's not an earthquake when you zoom in and you see something like this. Look at how the concentration of the energy, the high amplitudes, the bright colors are totally suspended above the y-axis, above the x-axis here. And so here is all of your high frequency, high amplitude information, and there's almost nothing down here. And so that is in stark contrast to some of the earthquakes that we looked at here. All right. So what I like to do after speaking for 25 minutes or so and giving you this tour is open the floor for questions. You can post your questions in the chat, and then you can either raise your hand or Giuseppe will offer a question that came through the chat as well. Giuseppe, you can take over there if you want to recognize people who are raising their hands and also offering questions from the chat.
All right, Brandon. Let's see. I'm not seeing any raised hands for now. So.
All right. Well, I will mention one thing because
Mhm.
we were just looking at this data. One thing I forgot to mention. This was posted by Alan from Weston Quakes on Twitter, and here's what the data looks like in his tweet. He's using a different color scheme for looking at his spectrogram than I'm using. I'm using one that's called Inferno. It is the default in data view, and the reason it's the default in data view is that this color scheme is very friendly to the colorblind. The one that Alan is using, I think, is a default in Swarm, but you can switch between color schemes just by going up here to the settings, and I've selected Inferno. You could try. We'll just grab another one, save it, and you can see that that will change the color scheme. So different people have different preferences and different um, energy sources kind of look better or easier to identify with different color schemes. And this data source is actually that we looked at was a snowplow passing over the street in front of Alan's house.
All right, Brandon. Thank you for that. We're starting to get questions. So the first one is from Amanda that asks, could you describe more about the differentiation between P and S waves from a shake that is closer to an earthquake?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go back to our example from Alaska. I believe that was R93B9. 13. Maybe that was. This was R50EC. All right, Amanda, thank you for your question. So this is the earthquake that is being registered in Alaska. And this color scheme is great for this. So you can see that it has very, very low frequency information. Okay, so the y-axis here is in F in hertz or frequency. So you go from low to high frequencies. And that is an earthquake registered at a seismic station in Alaska, but the earthquake happened in Japan. Now we're going to change and we're going to look at another earthquake that is local to this station. So this is an Alaskan earthquake. And you can see right here, the frequency content is more dispersed, more higher frequencies available. You have this nice, beautiful cloud. And it's like a sideways cornucopia, right? And then inside of that, to get to your particular question, you have the arrival of the P and the arrival of the S wave. Okay. Now this P wave has a velocity of around 5,000 meters per second, and the S wave 2,000 meters per second. So the P wave is traveling over 2 times faster than the S wave. And so if you were to look at this same earthquake at a station that is 100 kilometers away from this station and 100 kilometers further away from the source of the earthquake, because the P is traveling faster than the S, you'll begin to see a separation of these two waves, where at the next station you might have the P and then the S might be all the way over here. And so the earthquake will kind of spread out. Does that answer your question, Amanda? Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to.
I was kind of looking for, it definitely helps, but what I would really like to see is like visually kind of looking at it, if there are we just looking at the intensity or the frequency differences? Like visually, if I'm looking at this, is there a look, here is exactly where the S wave begins, kind of.
Oh, yeah. Sure. So this can be done both. This can be done we're looking at the waveform with your naked eye visually, or it can be done by looking at um, these spectrograms. And so we'll do both. Um, and Amanda, one thing to keep in mind is that this this identifying the actual onset for the P and even the S wave, or the S wave and even the P wave can be difficult even for seismologists at times. Here, the P wave is really abrupt. Um, you can see that there's just this 0 to 1 moment right here where it just goes boop and it pops up, and that's the onset of the earthquake. If you look in the spectrogram, you can easily see the onset there as well. Although notice there's this like little bit that's beforehand. So there's right here is the onset of the S. Now where's the onset of the P? Sorry, where's the onset of the S? What I usually do is I look for a change in the frequency content because I know that the P wave is going to be full of really high frequency and the S wave is going to be lower frequencies. So with your naked eye, you can see this pretty well here. You just have some really high frequency content in this part of the waveform. And then the waveform is spaced out a little bit more. It looks a little bit more spacious on this side. It's because there's lower frequency information here. And then there's this little dip. That little dip is probably where the S wave is. It's a little dip before we go much higher in amplitude. So I would pick it somewhere around there. If you switch to the spectrogram view, you might be able to see this as well, where the P wave is where we have these really bright colors, signifying this is where the highest amplitudes are. Then it diminishes, and you kind of get lost in the colors here until you get to this point. And that's where you get higher energy waves again, and that is the onset of the S wave. So if I was to circle them here, this would be the onset of the P. This would be the P wave all in here. And this would be the onset of the S, just refreshed. And then the tail would have been, the tail here is the entire S wave. Is that a little clearer for you, Amanda?
Yes, that helps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. That was a great question, Branden. So we have maybe a couple of questions that we can mix together because they are more on the noises subject. So we have Hugh that asks, do you find different noise from ocean or the sea nearby compared to wind or trees? So this is more like natural source noise. While David asks that instead he gets noise fixed at 19 hertz with no clue on what it could be. So how can we go in like trying to identify what's causing or the sources of all different types of noises that the Raspberry Shake detect?
Sure, we can speak to both of those. David, what's your station code? David, 2C1C.
2C1C. Yeah.
2C1C. Thank you, David. All right, so you have a Raspberry Shaken Boom. Okay. And I'm going to pull up your data. Okay. I'm going to zoom out a little bit.
Oh, here we go.
All right. Now, David, let's click around a little bit first because David said that he had a pretty consistent
Yeah, here it is.
signal. Oh, that's that you saw it well there. Ah, okay, I can see it
Yeah,
here too.
yeah.
Like this. All right. So, the first question was about more like ambient
Ambient
background
noise.
noise.
Yeah.
If you get more from the oceans, the closer you get to the ocean, the higher amplitude the noise becomes in very low frequencies. So like 0.2 hertz, for example, to 0.3. This is known as the microbarometer. And this is basically, you can think of it as the waves of all the oceans are crashing on the shore, the coastlines of all the continents, and they generate a seismic signal that's between 0.2 and 0.3 hertz. And that is very well recognized at all seismometers across the world, including the Raspberry Shakes. Um, and and so there's some seismic signals like that one that are kind of known, well studied, and easy to identify. However, there's other ones like you see here. So look at this signal. This ramps up and then comes down and then kind of decreases in frequency a little bit over time. Then we have other ones that are wispy in here. Okay. Anytime I'm seeing something that has this really smooth ramping, I'm thinking airborne. I'm thinking the Doppler effect. And so it might be planes or helicopters. Very typically, they're helicopters. And these can get more complicated if the helicopters have multiple props. And so you can see that pretty well in the seismic data. There's another signal right here that's pretty discrete and pretty high amplitude. If you switch out of the spectrogram view, you'll see that that signal is this right here, right? This little spike. But in the waveform view, you can't see anything about what's going on with all these different noise signals. It's all kind of mixed together. That's why it's best to look in the spectrogram. In a lot of this, when it's not an earthquake, because earthquakes are really, when you begin to look at earthquakes, they're very easy to see. You begin to see the pattern, especially with the clear PNS arrival. When you're looking at this kind of noise, you really have to do some Sherlock Holmes style investigation. And so you might be these noises might be generated, for instance, in your home. It could be something mechanical like your dishwasher, your dry cleaner, your washer, your air conditioner, your generator, an idling diesel engine outside. Any of these could generate noise like this. Or it might be a factory, that has some turbines, for instance, that's a few kilometers away from your home. And so it takes a little local knowledge to be able to go through and say, I know exactly what all these sources of cultural noise are. Does that answer your question, David?
All right, great. Branden, we have a very nice example in a question from Nandu Shah. If you can go to station EC4B.
E4B.
No,
What was the first letter?
E. Echo Charlie 4B.
You buddy.
Yep. And you can go, and then you can go to the January the 12th.
Okay.
Okay. There is an earthquake at around 8:35 UTC.
Okay, let me pull that up.
Okay, yeah.
Wow, right. This is a great example.
So
this is cool.
So the question Fernando asks, this was an earthquake, 6.2 in Mexico, and he asks, can you help me understand the different? There is obvious mechanical noise that seems to disappear for a couple of minutes, and then tail of the earthquake instead continues, while higher frequency noise starts again. So can you just give a bird's eye view on everything that's going on here?
I've never seen anything like this. So clearly the earthquake is here, right? All right, that's the easy part. And clearly when the earthquake arrives, it disrupts all three. There are three very discrete, very continuous cultural noise signals, let's say, that are in the spectrogram view. You can actually see these really well in the waveform. You can see that there's this high amplitude that drops off. And there's the earthquake. And then somewhere over here, you don't see it start as easily, but yeah, you see the earthquake disrupts it. That's so curious. Giuseppe, I'm at a loss. Do you have any insights as to what might be going on here?
So as far as I can see, that noise, that let's say which main line is about 18 hertz, and then there is a second straight line at 19, probably. Yeah, two very close together. They seem to appear quite regularly on this Raspberry Shake, and they last around 10 minutes. Then they stop for, I want to say 7-8 minutes, and then they start again. And I don't want to say this is pure coincidence, but it seems like that the earthquake literally arrived at the very same time, bar probably 1.5 seconds, that whatever mechanical equipment was creating that noise stopped working. I mean,
oh, you know what? If you scroll forward, you're right.
Yeah,
you can see that whatever the mechanical source is, that this is quite regular.
Yeah.
And notice in this example that whatever is at 19 hertz kind of stops right before the one at 18 hertz. So we go back to the earthquake. We have this one stops here at 19, and then the 18 hertz stops a little bit later, and it's coincident with the earthquake. Okay, so that explains that. That's weird. It starts up again before the earthquake's over. You can see the earthquake goes all the way on here. This one stops before the earthquake arrives, and then it starts again. And when whatever it is that's generating this signal has a very short time window when it ramps up till it gets into its run mode. And so you can see the signal ramping here. Yeah, totally coincident. Let's look at another time period. Same here. It stops, and then it ramps up, and it gets going again. And it also has this signature here that's associated with probably the same machine that's generating this signal. Wow. Okay. Thank you for this example. I hope that seems like a coincidence, but I hope that sheds some light on on what's going on there.
Okay. Thank you again, Nando, for sharing this with us, because literally it's one of a kind. It's literally one of a kind.
Giuseppe, I just want to interrupt you for a moment.
No
We're at around 45 minutes into the call, or 50 minutes past the hour, and I'm happy to take questions all the way through to the hour. So if anyone wants to stay with us, you're welcome to stay. You can also leave the call at any time, but we appreciate you spending the time with us to learn about how to identify earthquakes. And yeah, we'll close the call at the end, but if you need to leave now, just know that we appreciate you, and we appreciate the support you give to the Raspberry Shake Network.
And also remember, if you have to leave the call for whatever reason, this call will also be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So you can come back to this point in time anytime and continue watching.
I'll do one announcement now. And then I'll answer a question that I saw pop up, and then we'll go to your next one. So the announcement is that Raspberry Shake in the near term, either next week or the week after that, is going to be launching a community Discord server. And the community Discord server, if you haven't heard of Discord before, it's a web-based software platform that allows you to have conversations with other people in the community. And so this is a real-time version, basically, of WhatsApp or SMS that allow you to share content, including code, screenshots, etc. And there's going to be lots of different channels for people to have conversations about using their Raspberry Shake, setting it up, um, doing everything from just trying to understand what you're seeing on your Raspberry Shake if you're looking at data for the first time, to writing source code to do more interesting things. And so this is going to be a space where I'll be very accessible. Different members of my team are going to be very accessible as well. So it'll allow you to have real-time interaction with us. And so that's coming. And the only other thing that I wanted to speak to is I saw a question here. I think it was from Amanda. It popped up real quick. I couldn't read the whole thing, but I believe it was asking about the use of artificial intelligence for labeling what you're seeing inside of DataView. This has come up on every webinar, and yes, Amanda, or no, Amanda, that isn't available now. Yes, I believe it's going to be available in the medium term, and we are very interested in integrating something like that into DataView for sure. And so look for that in the future. You'll see on the side of my screen it says Meet the Shake AI. This is something different. This is basically just an LLM that allows you to interact and ask questions about Raspberry Shake. It kind of has all of the knowledge of Raspberry Shake's manuals and all the articles that have been written about it, etc. So it's more knowledgeable than ChatGPT. But this doesn't yet do anything inside of DataView with event or heliquoter, let's say, annotation. But we are very keen to integrate that in the future. So thank you for that question.
All right, thank you, Branden, for all the announcements. We're very eager to put out our Discord server, which will be coming. Now we have a question from Al Forster that has raised a hand. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Clear.
Well, thanks for taking my question. I come from a position of profound ignorance. I just received my Shake kit a couple of days ago. I haven't set up the station yet, but I was just wondering if you could speak perhaps to as far as position to mitigate some of the high frequency noise, if position of the Shake in terms of coupling. Is basically, should it be just sitting on a, for example, concrete floor in a basement or garage? Is that okay? What is the sort of the optimum placement, if you speak to that? And forgive me if this is a very, obviously simplistic question, but just curious about.
Giuseppe, I'm going to pass that one to you.
All right. So first of all, don't worry about. You can feel free to ask any kind of questions. There are no differences in how we receive them. We are always happy to answer. Let's go to a bit more details about the positioning of a newly received Raspberry Shake. So the best position would be the quietest location in your house, apartment. So, for example, it would be even, I don't know, the quietest corner of a room you seldom enter into. Or, for example, like you also said, a concrete platform in your garage. That sounds really amazing. It's probably one of the installations that most of Raspberry Shakers employ. Coupling is unless you haven't specified the model of the Raspberry Shake you received, but unless you got a Raspberry Shake 4D, all the others can simply be located and put on, like you said, concrete slab, floor. There are some shakers. I know there is one in Japan that lives on the 29th floor of a building, and he has his shake on a corner on the floor, and it perfectly receives both local and faraway earthquakes. So it can be a little bit of a game of a cat and mouse. So you may have to explore your house to try and find the best spot that you have available. I did this with my shake. I started with having it on my desk. As you can imagine, it was very noisy. And then I went to the upper floor, and then I came back to the ground floor. I don't have a basement or a garage, unfortunately, so I had to make do with what I had. I used to keep it on a windowsill, and that was great. It detected a very large number of earthquakes. And then I found, almost by chance, a little corner of a room which had more or less half of the noise I was getting on the windowsill. So I put it there. So unless you have, like you said concrete slab in your garage, I would go with that first, and probably would be a great spot.
Thank you. Appreciate the information.
Very welcome.
And welcome to the community.
Thank you very much.
Giuseppe, should we do one more question?
Yeah, so what? Let me see if we have anything else from the chat. I'm not seeing any other raised hands. Okay, yes, there is one from David. I think you meant, would you speak about love waves, David, in your, okay. So there's David asking if you could speak and illustrate a bit about love waves and if our shakes can see and detect them.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Giuseppe. I just deferred to you. Do you want to take this one as well?
I could, but I don't have the nice screen sharing background that you're
Yeah,
displaying.
well, do you want to guide? Do you happen, Giuseppe, off the top of your head to know of a station where I can see a love wave?
Probably yes. Give me a second.
So just for sort of background, Giuseppe's been with us for many years at Raspberry Shake. He started out with us as a hobbyist, like many of you, and then when he joined the team, he was super keen and interested in seismology, and I think that Giuseppe's knowledge of seismology is now on par with Faustino, who's also on the call, who's a professional seismologist, and myself. So the hardest questions I like to defer to Giuseppe now.
But I still think I have lots to learn, but I have learned a lot. That's true.
Absolutely.
So,
You've definitely looked at more waveforms than most seismologists ever have.
Probably. Branden, if you can go to my 3D 20D6.
All right, let's go. You were in.
Scotland.
All right. So what's your 23D6?
20D6.
I should have that memorized, huh? All right. I'm gonna pop over from there.
Then open.
Sorry, buddy. It's so cold up there.
Open it.
What are we opening?
On the 7th of January.
Okay.
And then to this day, just as a reminder, we had a magnitude 7.1 in southwestern China, which was well detected from all over the world. And
Beautiful. And Giuseppe, before we move forward,
Yeah.
just because there's a lot of people in the audience that have probably never heard of love waves.
Yeah.
What is a love wave?
That's another good question. You're right. So love waves, and also you can also find them associated with Rayleigh waves. They are classified as surface waves. Surface waves, usually, as Branden said before, P waves and S waves, they travel through the Earth's layers. So they travel through the crust, they travel through the mantle, through the inner core, they can bounce at boundaries. Instead, Rayleigh waves and love waves, they are surface waves, so they move on the relative surface of our planet. And they produce they have both a vertical and horizontal component. So you can see them with either our base model, the Raspberry Shake 1D, which has a vertical geophone, but you can appreciate all of them with a Raspberry Shake 3D, which has all three components: vertical, north-south, and east-west. And they are the slowest among all the waves produced by an earthquake. And they can take literally hours to reach your location if the distance between you and the earthquake is they are far enough. So, Branden, if you can go, the earthquake happened at 1 UTC.
Okay.
And then 41 minutes later, more or less, you will be able to see love and Rayleigh waves on my shake. 1 a.m. Sorry, Branden. 1 a.m. UTC.
Oh, 1 a.m.
1 a.m.
Okay. Let me get out.
Yep.
1 a.m. UTC down here, or yeah, that looks like it's it, right?
That's the 8th. You should go 1 day prior to that.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. No, sure. So this is an earthquake that was 7,500 kilometers away from me. So completely teleseismic. The P wave arrived. I think Branden, you already found it. So you can see that there is a lot of noise at very, very low frequencies. There's lots of it. Now, Branden, if you go back to the waveform view and filter it.
Oh, that's something I didn't show how to do today. What kind of filter do you want to apply? Global?
Well, this one, it's a custom filter, and that's to go between 0.001 hertz and 0.1 hertz. Okay, and now,
all right, so this is...
Now, increase the amplitude a little bit.
Oh, wow. I'll say, oops, I did it too much.
Yeah, just a couple of...
You can see these so beautifully. Wow, Giuseppe.
Here they are.
Clever.
Those are love waves and Rayleigh waves arriving at my Raspberry Shake from 7,500 kilometers away, 40 minutes after the earthquake. You can easily distinguish those kind of waves because they have the highest amplitude at this kind of filtering. You can see there are only those one popping out. And also they are much more spaced, so they have a longer period between one peak and the peaks and the valleys of this event. So I think if you can apply the same to a zoomed view, Branden, probably.
And just showing that filter again, if anyone wants to look at their data with the same filter. And then what did you want me to do there?
If you select, select that portion, okay, and then apply the same. Oh no, wait a minute. See here, this is my raw data, and can you see the Rayleigh waves and the law waves just at a glance? It can be very hard, but look closely.
A little bit right here.
Branden is highlighting with the mouse. You can see that before and after that, the waves are compressed together. They are compact. It's a continuing gray mess. But when those waves arrive, you see that periods, there are more gaps in it. Periods are extended. And if you filter it, applying the very same custom filter, maybe we can add this filter by standard, Branden.
That's a great idea. Go ahead and do that. Let's call it the love filter.
Yeah, here we go. Here you can see the arrival of the Rayleigh and love waves. Very high amplitude, longer period. Now, can all earthquakes produce this kind of waves? And more importantly, can all Raspberry Shake detect those kind of waves all over the world? That's a very hard question. And probably the answer is halfway between yes and no. Because if the earthquake is a very large one, consider this: magnitude 7, magnitude 8, magnitude 9. You will be able to see these love or Rayleigh waves wherever you are in the world with your Raspberry Shake, even if you are on the other side of the world compared to where the earthquake epicenter is located. Well, obviously,
the earthquake of this magnitude basically sets the Earth into a wobble, right?
Exactly. And well, obviously, unless there are local, low-frequency mechanical ambient noises that will cancel this kind of detection.
Yeah.
Other earthquakes.
But Giuseppe, so we're looking at an earthquake that happened in China, was magnitude 7.1.
Correct.
And is detected on your Raspberry Shake in Scotland. Yeah. And we're looking at a filter that shows the surface waves, which are either Rayleigh or love waves.
Love waves. Correct.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And this is a really beautiful example. Thank you for that question. Well, that Giuseppe, I think we should wrap it up. We've run way over here.
Oh yeah, we did. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Let's see. Let's go ahead and formally end this and just say thank you to everyone who's here on the call. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for your time, for your support, for your enthusiasm. And we look forward to interacting with you on the Discord server when we've launched that. And there'll be another one of these What's the Wiggle webinars happening in about a month or so, sometime in February. So we'll announce that soon. And also, if you happen to think today's webinar was going to be happening starting 10 minutes ago and not 70 minutes ago, just go ahead and stay on the call with us as everyone else closes off. So take care.
Thank you, everyone.